Welcome, everyone, to A Day in the Life, a conversation with Pitt public health students about studying public health genetics. I'm Megan Lyon. I am the Associate Project Director of the National Coordinating Center for the Regional Genetics Networks, otherwise known as NCC. And NCC is pleased to host Public Health Genetics Week. Public Health Genetics Week seeks to raise awareness and celebrate the field of public health genetics. And we're very excited to be partnering with the University of Pittsburgh School of Public Health, their Human Genetics program, to talk about what it's like studying public health genetics. And with that, I will pass it off to our moderator, Andrea Durst. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Megan. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this year's Public Health Genetics Week and to tonight's panel discussion. My name is Dr. Andrea Durst, and it's my pleasure to be moderating the panel today. We'll start off the panel tonight with some introductions and then move right into questions for our student panelists. You're welcome to participate by submitting your questions for the students as well through the chat, and we can ask them live on the panel discussion today. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. So I'll start with a brief introduction of myself. Again, my name is Dr. Andrea Durst, and I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Human Genetics here in the School of Public Health at the University of Pittsburgh. I'm the director of the MPH Public Health Genetics Program and associate director of the Genetic Counseling Program here at Pitt, where I have the pleasure of teaching and mentoring the amazing students on the panel today. In addition to my roles at Pitt, I'm also involved in a number of different public health genetics projects, including the NIMAC Regional Genetics Network, the APHA Genomics Forum, and the Pennsylvania Cancer Coalition's Cancer Genetics and Genomics Work Group. So that's just a little bit about me, and I'm going to turn it over now to the students to each introduce themselves, and we'll start with you, Rena.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rena. I just finished up my first year in the MPH program in public health genetics at the University of Pittsburgh.
Hi, I'm Grayson. I also just finished my first year in the MPH program at Pitt.
Hi, Marilyn. I'm actually a third-year PhD student. I got my MPH at the School of Public Health and Human Genetics in 2020.
Hi, everyone. I'm Samantha. I'm going to be a third-year student in the dual degree program for being an MPH and a GC student.
All right, great. And welcome to all of my student panelists tonight. Just to get us started off, so I have a question. How did you all find out about the MPH and Public Health Genetics program?
I can go first. I found out about it while searching for GC programs many moons ago when I had first started to thinking about applying for genetic counseling school. And when I looked into Pitt, having that dual degree, that MPH and GC always interested me. And so when I had gotten into the MPH only program a couple of years ago, it was never an issue of anything. I always wanted to do the public health part. And so like finding it in that way kind of was like a light at the end of like the little door that you didn't know that you had the opportunity to find. And I think that was really cool.
Great, thanks, Sam.
So when I was looking at different MPH schools, I really enjoyed the fact that it had this unique program in that it was melding together genetics and public health, because I did come from a background where I do more of like the wet lab sciences and molecular background. And so I thought it was super cool to have this program that kind of melds together that interest, because a lot of other MPH schools are focused more on the social sciences or epidemiology. And so I thought this was a really unique program to be a part of.
Yeah, I think similar to Marilyn, Pitt has a really unique perspective in combining genetics and public health. So I think in looking for higher education opportunities, the Pitt program really stood out to me in something that can combine my love of genetics and kind of the hard sciences while also teaching you how to apply that on a public health on a broader scale.
And I guess kind of to wrap up that question, my finding the public health program was very similar to Sam's. I was looking for dual degree options for GC and MPH, and I found out that Pitt had the MPH Public Health Genetics program, which is only one of 2 in the country. So I thought it was a very unique opportunity to apply both public health and, similar to Rena, my love of genetics that I've had from a young age.
That's great. Thanks everyone for sharing. You all kind of hit a little bit, I think, on my next question, which was what made you choose to train to be a public health genetics professional? But does anyone have anything to add there with that question?
Yeah, I can take that. My background is mostly in medical-based sciences. I'm a medical laboratory scientist by trade. So the opportunity to kind of take a step back and look at things from a broader scale, I thought was really exciting. We think of genetics as being super individualized with personalized medicine, precision medicine, but to be able to apply it on a larger scale and reach more than one person at a time was really exciting.
Great, excellent. Thanks, Rena, for sharing. So just as a reminder to our participants on the panel today, or in the audience today, you can submit your questions for us via chat, and I'll ask them live to the students here on our panel. All right, and so while we wait for you to put together your questions, I'll go ahead and ask another question. So tell us a little bit about your backgrounds before coming into the MPH programs, like, previous jobs or volunteer experiences, education.
I can kind of go first. So I came into the MPH program right from undergrad. I graduated in the spring of 21 with a bachelor's in biology and a minor in psychology. I had not had much previous human genetics exposure. My research lab at undergrad was plant genetics, so I knew I wanted to go the genetics route, and I wanted to work more with people. But obviously with undergraduates, it's a little bit harder to do human genetics work. So I thought that was a great pipeline into human genetics, and here we are.
So I graduated in 2016 with my bachelor's, and I completed this certificate in the conceptual foundations of medicine, and that's when I learned more about the population health and public health. And so I knew I wanted to go into that. And so as I was working as a research tech at a lab called the Drug Discovery Institute, we learned more about breast cancer and studying different mutations of breast cancer that makes it more kind of resistant to the known medications. I knew that I wanted to kind of meld together this kind of concept of like genetics affecting large populations with what I learned in my certificate. And so I took classes at the School of Public Health, and that's when I knew that this was the perfect mix of what I wanted to do.
Yeah, so like Marilyn, I graduated undergrad in 2016 with a biology background, so I always knew I wanted to be in sciences, but I kind of felt that lab work wasn't for me. Mostly, I didn't really want to be in that wet lab setting. I've done a lot of community work. I worked in community services, parks and recreation, city government, stuff like that for a while, even before, even like during undergrad and even after. And so trying to find that melding between public work and working with others and that love of science and that integration of all of it is what really kind of pushed me to a path of looking at public health. And then there was always that love for genetics. So having that in a program specifically kind of just made perfect sense to me.
Yeah, I touched on my background a little bit. I graduated with my bachelor's in the spring of 2019, so just eked it out before the pandemic. That was nice. And then my undergrad was in medical laboratory science. I had minors in biology and chemistry, so very hard science. I then worked for 2 years in a blood bank in Philly. It was wet lab, but it was clinical. So I got to learn a ton about medicine and a ton about how hospital systems work, but I also found myself learning and caring a lot about the disparities that I was witnessing within the different patient populations that I was seeing. So that really got me interested in public health and in health disparities. So then it kind of led to the public health, and then blood banking has genetic components. I've always been interested in genetics, so it all kind of, like other people have said, kind of melded together.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you all for sharing. So, one thing that I wanted to add is that, I know that many of you all and many students in the program have a background in kind of biology or the sciences coming in, but I think that an undergraduate education in a number of different areas really could lend itself well to coming into a public health genetics program. And so, we've had students before with psychology backgrounds, business backgrounds. It doesn't just need to be necessarily in the hard sciences. And so if public health is something that you're interested in and genetics is something that you're interested in, I would highly encourage you to, reach out and talk to either myself or the students on this panel or the other MPH Public Health Genetics program in the US, which is at the University of Washington, to talk about your interests and where you might fit into the field. So thanks everyone for sharing, your previous experiences before coming into the program. And with that, we have our first audience submitted question. And so this audience member asks, what was a challenge you faced while in the program and how did you overcome it? And I know some of you have more experience than others in the program.
I guess I can kind of start. So coming from a bio background, my undergraduate institution, our bio undergrad was really demanding, so it didn't really allow me much time to expand out and take any public health classes. So I had a little bit of imposter syndrome coming into the program. I was a little bit afraid that everyone was going to be at a higher level of understanding with public health more than I was. But coming into the program, everyone's coming from such different backgrounds that you're all learning at the same pace, and that imposter syndrome went away very quickly.
That's good to hear.
So I can go next.
Sure.
So in the summer between your first and second year of the MPH program, I completed this practicum experience, and I did it at the CDC. Previously it was known as the Office of Public Health Genomics, but now it's called Genomics and Precision Health. And essentially you have to complete a project with them. And it was really a challenge because they had me write the pages for their website on this disease called familial hypercholesterolemia. And the thing is they had me write it in a way that was very understandable to the general public, which can be very difficult because kind of like honing down hard genetic terms in a very easy and digestible manner was really hard. And also they had me use like visual abstracts, which can like bite-sized pieces of information, which can be very difficult, but it was really good training. And I worked very hard with the director there to try to like make it as readable as possible. And I think it turned out really well.
I remember that project. It turned out great.
I think one of the challenges, at least I think with my class we faced, was starting during the pandemic and being fully remote. And I feel like a lot of people understand that now, since we've all at some point been schooling in a pandemic or doing something during it. But I also think that was worthwhile, especially now that a lot of businesses and jobs are moving to a hybrid or remote schedule. You now have these tools to kind of take with you to help, like how you educated yourself during that time and how you work in settings like in person. And so I think it was a challenge to start school and go through school in that way, but then like transitioning to in person and doing all of that, I think it was actually a really worthwhile experience also, so that you can now be present and understand public health and public health genetics in any setting.
I think for me, coming off not straight from undergrad and taking some time off was good, but it was also a little scary because I hadn't been in school for 2 years and I wasn't sure, how much time you need to study. So I found myself like very concerned about studying and not really enjoying myself as much. So I think Pitt has a great balance of work, the amount of work demanded of you, but there's also great opportunities at the school to get involved in extracurriculars and be a part of the campus community. So it took a while to find that balance, but once I did, it was really great and make my time here a lot more enjoyable than just studying.
That's great to hear. I always love to hear, students overcoming those initial challenges or working through a really tough project. So I really appreciate you all sharing those challenges with our audience tonight. I know, Marilyn, you mentioned a bit about your practicum, and so I wanted to just put that out there for other students on the panel. If you wanted to talk a little bit about your practicum experience, I know some of you are just starting those, but if you want to talk about what it is you'll be doing or what it is that you have done previously for the practicum, I think that could be really helpful.
Yeah, I actually started mine a couple weeks ago, so I'm still getting my feet wet, but my practicum is not specifically in genetics. It's really just a public health practicum. I'm working with the Allegheny County Health Department, which is the county that Pittsburgh is in. And I'm working on their child death review project, going over data and looking at trends. They recently moved that from the epidemiology department to the family and child health department within the greater health department. So looking at both reorganizing how they store their data and their information, but also how to approach a child death from a community perspective instead of a strictly case numbers epidemiological perspective, trying to incorporate more of the community assets and community interventions. So we'll get back to you on what that project looks like, but I'm really excited to be working with them. And it is an important skill for public health genetics to be able to think about data, think about different contributing factors with it in the greater community instead of just numbers.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Rena, for sharing. And just to give a little bit of additional background information, that practicum came from one of the practicum opportunities that's really kind of put together by the School of Public Health, and there is a competitive process for applying for those practicums. And students in our public health genetics program are always very competitive, and oftentimes are getting those practicums, a couple of students each year. So that's always exciting. I know that the health department loves working with the public health genetics students, so it's always great when that match happens. But there's lots of different ways to find a practicum within the program. So we also have a list kind of within the program itself of public health genetics specific practicum experiences, or you're able to kind of go out and find your own as well. And so I know, Grayson, you kind of went out and sought out your own, if you wanted to talk about that a little bit more.
So today was actually my first official day at my practicum. I am working at UPMC Children's Hospital here in Pittsburgh. I am working within the Division of Genetic and Genomic Medicine with Leslie Walsh, who is a genetic counselor. I am working with a team of GCs and researchers to identify patients with achondroplasia, which is a form of dwarfism, and communicate to both providers. In this case, it would be the endocrinologist that would be working with these patients, as well as patients and their families about a new FDA-approved medication that can improve growth in children with achondroplasia. So I took more of the genetics-focused route compared to like what Rena did and some other people in our cohort. I really like this project because it allows you to work with a community who obviously doesn't see short stature as an issue, and it's not an issue, but this medication aims to help improve growth, which can reduce the number of surgeries that these children might need in the future. So I think it's a really cool opportunity. And not only am I working with creating language that is accessible to patients and their families, but also being able to create language, transferring it from a genetics perspective to more of a physician's perspective when writing the letters of information to the endocrinologist about the medication.
Great, thank you for sharing. All right. Samantha, did you want to? No, okay. So then I have another audience question. And this audience member asks, what type of job do you hope to get into following your education? If you know.
Because I didn't answer the last one, but if I could have my a dream job, and it was, I either created it or it was made for me or just existed in the world, it would definitely be something that I could do genetic counseling, but then also be part of a local public health department or a public health initiative in the area that I am in. Some places are part of the All of Us study. And so it would be amazing to work as a genetic counselor, but also be part of the All of Us study as maybe a counselor or public health genetics expert in that area, or working for a company that, that has that line of, we are trying to do public health initiatives, but also have the need for a genetic counselor as well. That would be the dream for me.
Anyone else have any thoughts to share about jobs after graduation?
Currently, I'm toying with the idea of pursuing a PhD in epidemiology with a focus in comboing pediatric and molecular epidemiologies. So hopefully focusing on some pediatric genetic disorder. And then long-term goal, I would love to work in more of advocacy with the Pediatric Genetic Disorder Organization. So both working with GCs to kind of educate families and communities, as well as just going out and being part of that community and seeing how they live and just kind of working with outside populations.
Great.
Given my laboratory background, it would be a dream to work in some kind of state lab where they administer a newborn screening program, or in a third-party company that does that, and work on kind of that administrative process, understanding kind of from both sides, the bench and also the public health aspects. We talk a ton about newborn screening in public health genetics, and it's something that's super interesting to me. So that would be the dream.
That's great. That's great. And Marilyn, I know that, you obviously after your MPH program moved into our PhD program. So did you have anything to share about the process that kind of led you to that decision? And any thoughts on what's next for you?
Sure. So I decided to go straight into the PhD program because a lot of my friends were telling me that if you want to be in government work, which is what I wanted to do, you kind of have to get that PhD degree. And so my dream would be to work at the National Human Genome Research Institute, NHGRI, at the NIH. I would love to work and do laboratory, public health laboratory work, or be part of creating programs across the US that incorporates genetics, such as genetic screening, cascade screening. The NHGRI does offer fellowships for students after they finish their PhD, specifically in genetic policy or genetic literacy improvement across the US. And so I would love to do one of those after I finish my PhD.
That would be great. That's great. All right. So thank you all for sharing that with the audience. I have another audience question. But first, I just wanted to say that, our graduates from the MPH program have gone into a number of different fields. And you heard the really varied interests just from our 4 student panelists tonight. But we've had students go into more research-facing positions where there may be overseeing clinical trials. We've had a number of students go into the All of Us research program, which is the large precision medicine initiative study in the US. We've had students go into advocacy as far as advocacy organizations, policy. So really, I think the sky's the limit. And that's the really nice thing about this being really just a rapidly expanding field, is that graduates with this training in both public health and genetics really have the opportunity to kind of pave their own way and to really kind of tailor a career that's specific for their interests. So lots of opportunities available out there. All right, so our next question is, how different is the MPH from the MS in human genetics? So I know, I don't know if anyone has like a deep understanding of the MS in human genetics. So maybe that's something that I can go ahead and answer. And so, I think one of the big differences is that the MS in human genetics is really focusing on research. So that degree, you're getting the coursework in human genetics, and then most students have a laboratory research experience. They complete their thesis on that laboratory research that they do throughout the program. Whereas the MPH really is looking at, genetics and how genetics applies on a population level to help improve health, help improve access to genetic services. We talk about ethical, legal, and social issues in public health genetics. We talk about policy issues, and students really, in addition to that core human genetics education, also get a core public health education as well. And so, students in the MPH program are taking classes with all of the same classes as all of the other MPH students in the school. So from all the different departments, there's a core curriculum that everyone takes. And so they're getting that kind of different background in how to really work with populations, thinking about education, again, many different routes, I think, as well for things like practicum, whereas with the MS in human genetics, really you are focused on laboratory research. And so I think that ultimately, if someone's trying to decide between the two programs, really thinking about, where your interests lie and maybe where some of your previous work, what that focused on, and if there's an area where you wanted to gain, more education after the previous work and education that you've already had. All right. So the next question that I have for you all, just more in general, what does public health genetics mean to you?
I guess I can start. So for me, public health genetics means working with a community and going into that community. And I mean, for me, I find educating populations about certain genetic disorders and just public health interests in general is super duper important. So I guess to me, public health genetics is just making sure that everyone has access and has education of some sort on even the basics of how genetics works. That way, in case there's ever a time in their lives or their children's lives that some type of screening comes up, they kind of have the information necessary to somewhat understand what's going on.
So for me, it's utilizing genetics and genomic tools and research to better improve just the population health in regards to genetic disorders and diseases, whether that be by, like Grayson said, improving genetic literacy and knowledge across the US, but also to make sure that any type of research or techniques that come out, we can help use that in more of like treating whole populations rather than individuals.
I think on both of those notes, public health genetics is trying to be on the forefront of any genetics research and genetics education out there. We're trying to make sure the population is prepared for this moving forward, because genetics is going to be the way that I think many of our healthcare and our systems are going to be put in place, because that's what it appears to be, especially in our realm. And so public health genetics is making sure that the population in the world is ready for this, and that they do understand what this means for them, that it doesn't come out and then they're learning after. We're learning, helping them learn before.
I'd also like to add that we should make sure that it's ethically sound, because it is unknown regions that we're going into. And so we want to make sure that it's safe and also just, ethically wise to do.
And also ensuring the equity and the equitability, not just the ethically. Like Grayson said, improving access not only in the general sense, but ensuring that we're making it available to all populations, not just the well-informed and well-financed, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, you all have hit on some really important points, I think, that really, form the base of what we do in public health genetics and what our goals are. So thank you for sharing those thoughts. Now, I know earlier we talked about challenges that you faced in the program, but what is your favorite thing? What has your favorite thing been about the MPH Public Health Genetics program thus far?
I think I'm still working on my thesis, but like formulating my thesis and my essay was actually one of the more, I think, interesting. And I feel like it's really rewarding, because you get to sit down and think about something that fully really interests you. It's something that you want to talk about and put your knowledge and pretty much your blood, sweat, and tears into while you're writing this thing and researching it all. And I think that's really rewarding to see it, and seeing other people read and be like, yeah, I understand where you're coming from. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's very challenging, but I think the end of it is also incredibly rewarding, and it makes you feel very like, oh, I'm a real professional here. I have these thoughts and I learned all this information, and I can speak on it now with some sort of authority. I think that's really rewarding.
I think one of my favorite parts, Pitt has amazing professors. We learn a ton in the classroom, but everyone comes from such a different background, at least in our cohort, that I find I'm learning so much from my classmates every day. Everyone comes at something with a slightly different angle, a slightly different background. Everyone has different strengths. So just being able to learn as a group and reap the benefits of each other's expertise. And they're also really awesome people, and I like to be around them. So yeah, the social bonds and the learning bonds with the community, with the other students, has been amazing.
Similarly to Rena, I really enjoy the camaraderie that our classmates and professors have. I love how passionate they are about genetics and public health. I really have to say some of my favorite interactions have been with the professors. They really truly care about the students. And they want to make sure you're doing the best you can. And I haven't experienced that anywhere else. So that's one of my favorite parts about being specifically in this program, in this department.
My answer was very similar to Rena's, with seeing the different backgrounds people come from, but also within our program, you're not only becoming friends and getting closer to people in your cohort. As first years, we do a buddy system with the second year students. So we're able to see what they're doing post-grad, how they're getting along with writing their essay. So it's really cool to see someone who's a year above you, kind of working through it. So you kind of have an idea of what's coming next for when you get to that point. So I really liked both interacting with the first and second year cohorts.
That's great. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. We've got another audience question. And so this question is, can an MPH student be a clinical researcher or a clinical geneticist? And I don't know if this is, again, one to kick to me, but I'll open it up to you all first.
I mean, I know students or individuals who have a degree in public health genetics can work in clinical research. I don't think they're PIs of it by any means, but I know people who have gotten jobs and are doing what they wanted to do and are working in clinical research as research coordinators and whatnot. So that is an option, but I'm not fully, Andrew, you could probably touch on if they can be PIs or not.
Yeah, so I think that's a really good point. And we have several graduates who are working in clinical research in some of the roles that Samantha had mentioned previously. I think in general, it is difficult but not impossible to be a PI of a research study without a doctorate degree. And so for my students who come through the program who are really interested in leading research, that's when we start talking about the option of a PhD. Or a DRPH in public health or in a related field that they might be interested in. And I think that's one of the reasons. I think there are many reasons to consider a PhD, but I think that is really one of the reasons why a student might consider going on and getting a PhD. And then in relation to a clinical geneticist, so that actually is kind of one of the major differences between the MPH program and some of the clinically based programs. So a clinical geneticist, and I'm guessing this person might be using the term broadly, but more specifically, that's referring to a doctor. And so clinical geneticists need a medical degree in order to practice. But if we're thinking about genetic counselors, for example, who also practice clinically in the area of genetics, the MPH degree differs from the genetic counseling degree in that it doesn't train for that one patient, one provider model of providing clinical genetic services. However, I really feel like public health genetics encompasses a lot of the issues that ultimately impact clinical care, like education and access to services, equity, which I know some of the panel members had talked about, and ethics. So there's really a lot that can be done with an MPH in public health genetics that touches the clinical space. But as far as providing those clinical services to patients, the program does not train for that. All right. I don't see any more audience questions. So if you're out there in the audience and you've been waiting to ask a question, now is your chance to do that. And we'll give you a little bit of time to get those questions in and over to us as the panel.
Andrea, going back a bit about the difference between the MS and the MPH in genetics, I think you can also, if you wanted to do an MS in genetics, you could also get the certificate in the public health genetics. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Thank you so much for reminding me of that. So yes, so we do also have in the school a certificate in public health genetics. And so that's available not only to students in our department who might be pursuing, a MS in human genetics or a PhD even, or in our genetic counseling program. We also have an additional master's program in the department, which is the MS in genome bioinformatics. And so that's open to any student in the department who's not in the MPH program, but then also to students from across the School of Public Health, who might be getting their MPH in epidemiology and they have an interest in genetics and they want to add the certificate on. So it's a way to get kind of a more in-depth experience than maybe just taking an elective course in public health genetics while getting your MPH in a different subject area. And then likewise in the school school, we have many other certificate programs as well that are housed in the different departments within the School of Public Health. And many of our students have pursued those certificate programs. And so, some of the ones that are more commonly done are, we have a health equity certificate, we have a global health certificate, we have an LGBT health and wellness certificate. And so those really offer some really great opportunities for students to expand their expertise and learning in those particular areas while still having that MPH public health genetics concentration. This question, we have a new audience question. So do you have any favorite classes?
Probably my favorite class that I've taken thus far has been chromosomes. So for our cohort and the cohorts before us, chromosomes for the MPH program has been listed as an elective course. It is a requirement for the GCs and the MS students. So you do get to take that class if you choose to take it with some of the other first years or just other people in the Hugh Gen department, which is really cool. It kind of gives you like an in-depth look into how certain genetic disorders like come about, looking at chromosomes, looking at different abnormalities and kind of identifying them. So coming from more of an MPH perspective, that was really informational because obviously I'm not a GC student. So in the future, I won't be helping to diagnose people and looking at stuff, but having the understanding of exactly how those disorders look on different testing is very cool.
And my answer is not very interesting. My favorite class is the molecular basis of inherited disease. It's kind of, for all of human genetics, the baseline genetics course. So you really break it down and go back to basics. You learn all of the DNA structure, and then you kind of start to build up to on a disease level with different inherited diseases and the genetics that play into it. And I actually love that class so much that I'm going to TA it next semester. So, I think it's exemplary of how great Pitt is at making sure everyone is on the same understanding. Some people, like Andrea said, don't have a huge hard science background. So that class and many of the other courses, especially in the public health side, make sure that everyone gets the basic understanding for every different component of our education.
My favorite class was population genetics. Similar to Rena, it kind of lays down the baseline of genetics. But I also found that it really built a great foundation for me because even in my PhD, I'm reading a lot of literature and it always goes back to the fundamental population genetics. And so it's really helped me have a better understanding of that literature. So I guess I'm a little biased towards it too, because I also TA'd for population genetics.
That's great.
I really enjoyed our ethics class that we have. That was super interesting when I took it as a first year. And then I was able to kind of audit it when I started the GC program to take some GC specific things. And I have found it so fascinating and rewarding because there are things, especially being with a whole bunch of different people, everyone has different perspectives, and being around all those different perspectives helps give you an idea of just the world around you. And ethics is something that's not black and white, and what you think could be correct is not what other people think is correct. And I think it's nice being in a graduate level ethics course to talk about all of that stuff.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, thank you all for sharing those courses. I'm glad the people got to hear about a different course from each of you. And I think that, the curriculum is really unique in that aspect, in that it does have that core in human genetics and then also the core in public health. And that also allows students to take classes with other groups of students. So, Rena mentioned that the molecular class is one of the classes that kind of everyone in the department takes. You're taking classes with PhD students, with MS human genetics students, genetic counseling students, MS genome bioinformatics. But then you have some classes that are just specific, mostly to your public health genetics cohort. And then you have classes that you're taking with students from across the school. So, there are students from all departments in your epidemiology class, or your biostatistics class. And so you get exposure that way too, to lots of different, background people with different backgrounds, different ways of thinking. There's a lot of, especially in kind of some of the more culminating courses, a lot of group work where putting students together from different departments so that everyone can bring their different training and perspective to those group projects. Great. Thanks for sharing that. We have a couple of additional questions here. So we have an incoming student on the audience today, and I apologize, incoming student, I cannot see your name, but welcome to the Pitt Public Health Genetics program. Well, I'll be really excited to see you in the fall. And this student asks, what can I look forward to as an incoming student?
So our department specifically has this retreat at these climate tuning ecology laboratories. It's amazing. It's a great bonding experience. You get to hear talks from leading scientists and research from the current students, but also it's a great time to just talk with your professors and your other students, and it's so fun. You get to go canoeing, sit around a fire. It's great.
It is really great.
Like, I second that, but also to not say the same thing, making memories and relationships with your cohort and other students in the public health school. I think just you're around the same people almost every day or every other day when you have class. So you get to know some of these people really, really well. And then you get to know others in all the other public health departments, especially when you're going through those core public health classes like epidemiology and behavioral and community health. You get to know people in there. And there are people who I had one class with my first year fall term, and I had class in spring term or spring semester last year, and we still remember each other, and we're perfectly hadn't seen each other for half of a year, and we're just oh yeah, I remember you, we had this class. And I think that's great.
Speaking a little bit to what I've kind of talked about before, Pitt has a ton of collaborative learning spaces too in the human genetics department, and there's tons of places to study. So there's always somebody around who is probably taking the same classes as you. You can ask questions, you can hang out, you can really get to know each other. Just a great community at Pitt.
I want to say everything, but one of the things that I really liked at the beginning of the fall last year, it's not HUGen specific, but the school did a really great job with some of the orientation activities. Last year, they allowed students to sign up for a trolley tour with one of the trolley companies in Pittsburgh, and it was a free tour for incoming students, and they took you around different landmarks in Pittsburgh and kind of let you get the lay of the land. You got to go on the Duquesne Incline, which is one of the little cable cars that goes up the hill, which is very Pittsburgh. So just the activities that the school and Pitt itself has planned for incoming students and just to kick off the beginning of the school year is really great.
Yeah, great. Thank you for sharing. So the next question we have from the audience is about practicum experiences. And this person asks, when you were looking for your practicum experience, what types of experiences in general were available to you? So maybe what did you look at as an option that you didn't choose for your practicum? And then there's a follow-up question here that's asking what actually is a practicum in MPH. So let me answer that one first, and then I'll kick it to you all. And so the practicum experience is a requirement of the program. It's a 200-hour experience where students go out into kind of the real world and find a it's kind of like an internship. Students work oftentimes with an organization on a specific project or in a specific area. And it allows students to have, while still in school, that kind of real world experience working with a variety of different stakeholders in public health, and just getting a feel for what that might look like after graduation. And we've had many students who have built just amazing relationships with practicum sites and their preceptors at those sites, to the point where they've been offered jobs after graduation at their practicum organizations, where practicum organizations come back to us year after year and say, hey, do you have any more public health genetics students? And so, I think it's a very important part of the program. It's a part of all of the MPH programs in the School of Public Health. So students from across the school are kind of doing the same types of things. It's often done in the summer in this program. It doesn't have to be, but that's generally when a lot of students get started on that practicum experience. And so now I'll bring it back over to you all for, what were some other things that maybe you thought about and then decided not to do? Or other things on the list that intrigued you?
We get part of like your first years that you get weekly seminars. And so we have individuals from, if they're on Zoom across the world, essentially, that came in to talk. And you can, if there's one that interests you, you could definitely talk to Andrea and like reach out to individuals to see that you want to do your practicum with them. I know that was something that like really interested me when I was trying to figure out my practicum and like learning and going through that way, because there were people that in locations that I wanted to be at or studying something that interested me that wasn't really applicable to something that we had here around Pitt. And so that was something that you can do. You can find your own and use that as a resource as well.
Anyone else have any? I know that some people kind of know what they want and they just go for that. And that happens a lot as well. I can speak to some of the ones that are kind of more standardly on our list. So we've had many students in the past actually do practicums with the National Coordinating Center for the Regional Genetics Network, and they have a variety of programs and projects that students can work on. We've had students go to the Genetic Alliance, which is a large advocacy organization. We have had students, I'm trying to think, go to various other advocacy organizations. So there are a lot of them that have kind of ties with Pitt or might be local to Pittsburgh. And so we've had students go to more kind of disease-specific advocacy organizations. We've had students go and work with the regional genetics networks on various projects during their time in the program. In the past, we've had students like Marilyn go to the CDC, Office of Genomics and Precision Public Health. And so really, again, it's just a wide variety of things that are available for students. And I've had plenty of students who have kind of paved their own way and made their own practicum experiences. We also, like I had mentioned earlier, have some of the ones that are more school-wide. So we have the one with the Allegheny County Health Department that Rena is getting started in. We also have one called Bridging the Gaps, where students are matched with community organizations. And so, if you're really interested in community work, that can be a great option as well. So there, again, a lot of options out there.
And also to tag onto that, you can do more than one thing. If you have multiple interests, you can split up your hours amongst different organizations or different avenues. It doesn't have to be locked into just one thing.
Excellent. Any other questions from the audience? All right, well, it looks like we're just about at time already. Thank you, everyone, for your excellent questions for our student panelists tonight. And thank you to my student panelists. You all did a great job answering everyone's questions. If you have a question that you didn't get to answer, didn't get to ask tonight, or if you're watching the recording of this and want to get in contact with one of us, my contact information is online on the Pitt Public Health website, but also a lot of us have the contact information on the website that houses this specific event. So please feel free to reach out to us. If you're interested in public health genetics, I encourage you to reach out to me to talk about your interests. Reach out to the University of Washington MPH Public Health Genetics Program, which again is the only other one in the country. There are only 2 of us. Also an excellent program. And we are more than happy to talk about where your interests lie and if this is the right path for you. So any other closing words from any of our panelists today? Nope.
I can say thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. I really hope that we piqued your interest in public health genetics and that you consider a career in it.
Thanks, Marilyn.
And like Andrea said, any one of us would be more than happy to ask questions if you want a student perspective on any specific thing. Always feel free to reach out if you're not sure who to talk to. I'm sure Andrea would be happy to navigate you over to some of our student representatives or student admission coordinators. But yeah, we're happy to talk to you, and we're so happy that you're interested in public health genetics, and thank you so much again.
All right, everyone, have a great night. We look forward to hearing from you soon.